All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones.
And I'm Cameron Horan.
And this morning we've got another in-season agronomy insights episode. We've got our staff agronomists from around the state trying to give some crop updates on what's going on out there. So we'll jump right into it and try to keep this kind of short and sweet. I do want to let everybody know we are recording this on Friday, August 25th. So if you're listening to it at a future date, just to let you know, we are on August 25th when we're pulling the trigger on recording this. So I think last week we did, or 2 weeks ago, we did north to south kind of on crop reports. So this week we're going to switch it up. We're going to start down in southwest Missouri, southeast Kansas with Shannon McClintock, and we'll roll north from there. So Shannon, go ahead and give an update to us if you would.
Yeah, good morning, guys. So the excessive heat we've had this week is really starting to move corn along. Corn's harvest started this week. As expected, yields that I've been hearing are extremely variable. Variable from mile to mile, but really field to field too, and within the field. Soil types are really showing, where we're really drought stricken again this year. It's playing another toll. I'm not comfortable enough yet given exact yields, but we've had where our average is going to be, but our range so far has been from 40 to around 150. It's been catching it, but there's a lot more on closer to 40 than there is 150 so far. I'd say we're just getting started. Less than 5%'s been harvested this time. In soybeans, that's kind of where our focus has been this week. Podworms and armyworms are making their appearance pretty heavily, actually. Especially in the double crop beans. Earlier this week, some tiny podworms are starting to be found, and by later this week, they're really blowing up, especially in the D7. So on in southeast Kansas. So being really diligent there. If you haven't looked at your fields in the last few days, it may be good to follow up before the weekend gets here over the weekend and have a plan in place. Most of the issues have been podworms and not so much armyworms. So really, we're kind of open with insecticides that way. If we want to be cautious when we have an armyworm infestation, make sure we're not just going out there with a straight pyrethroid due to possible resistance. Fungicide applications, there's been some questions on those double crops. Well, do I go ahead and put my fungicide on since it's a little early? Most of the beans I've seen have been R2, which is on that early side of that spectrum of when we want to put a fungicide on. My advice would be if we're making that trip across the field now, I'd rather just, if we're going to include it, go ahead and include it now, and rather than kind of wait to come back in another week. I don't know that we'll see the difference to justify that extra application. So that'd be my word of advice. So other than that, I think that pretty much catches most of what's been going on this week.
Gotcha. Good stuff, Shannon. I appreciate that. I think I have a sneaky suspicion we're going to see that soil type variability across most of our geography. I think the drought kind of highlights that kind of stuff. So,
yep,
for sure. Great report. Thanks, Shannon. Jesse, I've got you kind of next as we kind of roll from south to north-ish. We'll swing east a little ways, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
But now, this is the common theme. It's just been hot this week, which is probably more welcome when you look at the crop. It just really helped push this crop along, especially our corn. It was kind of just hanging on, and we really needed it to just finish out so it could start drying down. And then the rice is in the same boat. It just seemed like it looked the same there for 2.5 weeks when we were cool and wet, and it's really progressed this week. A lot of draining going on the rice. I'd say by Labor Day, there'll be a lot of guys cutting rice. A few guys have tried here and there, but nothing too excited. Same with the corn. A few guys have tried, but it's really not started yet. Beans, most of our beans, even our double crops, are late R3 going to R4, and then our early stuff's R6, R6.5. So we're not long on it either. Seen some beans gramoxoned here towards the south half of the territory. A little early, in my opinion, but if that's what they want to do, that's what they're going to do. So let them do that. But really, we're looking at the finish line and just waiting it to get here so we can start harvest.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, there's definitely kind of a two-sided story to the heat situation for sure. So, okay, we'll move on north to Retail Central. Scott?
I guess as far as just starting on corn,
not a lot of corn at Black Layer, but we're very much late R5. I have seen some corn that's already right at or near Black Layer, but that's been mostly in the more severe drought-stricken fields. Continuing to find tar spot throughout our region. I think Tyler reported last week we'd found some south of Mexico that was about as far south as we had seen. We've heard reports in the past week, so it's continuing to progress. I know they found some in Boone County a couple days ago. I mean, we're just kind of finding it a little bit of everywhere. Not blowing up by any means, but able to find it to where we know that it's made it that far, and we're going to be looking at knocking them going forward. Starting to get some reports of southern rust showing up in several parts of our territory. Found some yesterday in the bottoms around Columbia. Another report yesterday south of kind of the Jeff City area. These are fields that are far enough along that we're not going to take any action with it, but it did make it up this far. Not excuse me, not widespread necessarily, but I am getting some reports of them down corn and stalk rots really causing some integrity issues with the stalks and lodging. I looked at a field yesterday. Again, this was in a more drought-stricken area, but it had some very serious lodging. It's going to create some issues. In the field, it appeared, Fusarium, Gibberella, some crown rots. I took them to the lab to try to isolate a little more of, what we're dealing with. In this particular case, it was a field that had some problems in the past. So I'm hoping it's fairly isolated, but as I've talked to folks throughout the region, I know there are a few other pockets. I guess one of the few action items I really have for this week is that I would be out in your cornfields and just trying to figure out where I need to be focusing attention come harvest. I don't think we're dealing with widespread issues. I'm not sure how many thousand acres of corn my folks are looking at, but I've not received any reports and they're still out looking at it. So I think these are going to be very isolated pockets, but one of those pockets happens to be on your farm. I'd want to know about it. So, don't just drive by, keep the truck running, keep the air on, run out in there a little ways. Just push on the stalks, see what you're dealing with and move on. These are very isolated, the varieties. The field I was in, one variety had some major issues and, another variety had been planted right beside it, actually splitting the planter did not. And the same variety that had issues down the road looked awesome. So, there's a lot of factors that come in. It's totally that disease triangle and including, weather being a big part of that, that's driving that. But I would definitely have that on my radar. Moving on to corn. I mean, sudden death has really shown its face here in about the last week, 10 days. We're finding some brown stem rot out there amongst the sudden death, but I would say 90% plus of what we're finding after we split stems ends up being sudden death. Some other diseases are also still showing up. Appears to be Phytophthora or something along those lines, because just all of a sudden little pockets just are dead. A lot of that happened after the last rain events, but we're continuing to see some of those things. I'm still trying to draw some conclusions on the SDS situation and how it centers around our treatments. I don't have a lot of information, and I've been going in so many different directions. I haven't been able to really focus just on that and dig in to find out what treatments, whether or not somebody used an Olivo or Saltro or something. From the standpoint of phone calls and concerns about having the SDS show up behind those treatments, I have not received those. As I've talked to some of our industry folks, they have not. As from the timeline of when the SDS really started to show up, though, I expect as strong as it is showing up, that we will have some breaks on those treatments as well. More than just delayed, which the later it shows up, usually the less effect we have. But so far, that's kind of the observations I made there. I guess a couple other notes I made. Shannon touched on this. Army worms are out there. They're not widespread. They're nothing like they were 2 years ago, but where they've shown up, they've been intense. So as short as we are on on grass and other forages, I would definitely be out looking at those. And you really can't drive by. You gotta kind of stop. And if you find a brown patch, get out in it, get out in the green grass beside it, and you really have to kind of crawl around on your hands and knees. And it's tough when it's 100 degrees because they're pretty good at hiding. So definitely be out looking at your grasses. If you've got alfalfa, I swept some alfalfa yesterday, and it wasn't so intense that I said we needed to get in there right away. And I was actually finding some dead army worms as well, so I was hopeful about that. They were smaller, but there were fall army worms in that alfalfa, and this was a patch that was destroyed a couple years ago, or at least took a cutting away. So be mindful of that. I saw, maybe you all have seen this. I'd be interested to hear. I have never seen corn completely stripped by army worms, and I saw that earlier this week. Now this field did have a lot of grass in it, right next to some other pasture that had army worms in it. So I don't know if the grass basically facilitated moving the insects into it, and then they went ahead and took care of the corn as well. But that was a new one to me. Years past, those crops right up against where severe army worms were, I've seen them go after the alfalfa and the grass and some of the emergency grasses we throw, teff and things like that, and leave the corn and some of our other crops alone. But they rolled right through it like everything else. So that was a new one for me. I know a lot of hay being made in our area right now. It's been kind of tough with the humidity. I've talked to a lot of guys that are really centering on this next week to try to get some stuff knocked down. So that's kind of factoring in as they pay attention to the insects. The crop's ready, alfalfa in particular. In some cases, it's ready to go down. But I know folks that have already had some stuff down. They've really struggled getting it to pretty tough to dry stuff out in 90% humidity or whatever we've had. So I think that's all I've got, guys.
All right. Good stuff. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Kevin, that leaves you for last out of Retail North.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. So I'll start with corn. Milk line on corn, he's hitting the average is about halfway down. So we're getting pretty close to grain maturity. We have, we've been keep talking about tar spot. We've found it in some more counties up north, Lynn County and Harrison County. Found it there this week. So north central, it's been pretty heavy northeast, northwest. So we're getting it identified in the central part now. So also Craig Russell in northwest Missouri and Megan Atkins in northeast Missouri have both found southern rust this week. So we'll add that to our pile of diseases for the year. With that being said, I mentioned that the milk line was halfway down in corn. So that means that grain fill is 90% finished, or 90% of the dry matter's in the grain. So not a huge concern finding these diseases that late. Even where we've had the tar spot, a lot of these fields did have a fungicide on it, and it has not been very aggressive. So we're still, even up to this point, even where we found tar spot 3 weeks ago, it has not taken a whole lot of leaf area out. So I think with the management practices we've been recommending, with these fungicides, I think that's helped us out quite a bit, and kind of help keep this stuff at bay. I think the main thing we'll be looking at now, rather than yield losses, would be plant intactness at harvest. Like Scott had mentioned, kind of keep checking those stocks, look at that standability. We may just have to prioritize some fields at harvest, but that's probably what we're going to be looking at. Soybeans, pod fill is finishing up. A lot of beans hitting that R6 stage. So, we're still have green soybeans there. We don't have anything turning yet, but we are we are getting pretty close to maturity. Most of the issues we've found in soybeans this week have been water related, um, where it got fairly wet the past couple weeks, and then hot and dry this week. I think it took a pretty big toll on some of these beans that it had water over them. Also, Phytophthora has been showing up as well. So in these wetter areas, we've been noticing some beans dying, and Phytophthora has been the culprit in a lot of these bottom fields where we're seeing some yellow and brown soybeans. So with Phytophthora being a water mold, where those spores move when fields are wet. So kind of seeing the aftermath of a lot of those heavy rains from a couple weeks ago. So other than that, that's kind of isolated in lower areas. Low spots in bottom fields overall. I think the soybeans do seem to still be in pretty good shape. There is enough soil moisture there to handle this hot week of 190 and 100-degree days all week. So that should about cover it for the north.
Yeah, awesome, Kevin. No, I appreciate that. I'll ask you kind of one follow-up question, something I've seen driving around. I'll echo you on I've been kind of all over North Missouri this week, I guess, and a lot of beans that aren't green that I feel like should be green. And you mentioned some of it with the SDS and Phytophthora and those kind of things. I mean, is there anything? I know we've talked some about the seed treatment stuff before. You might just kind of quickly touch on that again. And is there anything else? I mean, I know this is kind of something that this year we were worried about seeing because all the beans went in so early. Is there anything else that we should be doing to kind of prevent that early die off for subsequent years here? Because we know that, I mean, there could be some fairly severe yield loss in some of those areas that are turning prematurely like that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As far as in addition to treatments, really the only other thing we're going to be able to do on those particular diseases is variety selection. So, picking varieties are going to be more tolerant. Our most of our fungicide seed treatments are very active on Phytophthora. Unfortunately, we get the late season. It doesn't get us through the season. It covers Phytophthora early, which the effects of Phytophthora early on are stand loss. But those treatments do not hold throughout the season. And then the SDS, of course, that's infected early in the season, so that treatment's protected against that infection. But we don't see the foliar symptoms of it till later. But yeah, treatments for those diseases we're talking about are important. But there's nothing we can spray on over the top for these particular diseases. So variety selection is really the other one. So if we've got a history of whether it be SDS or Phytophthora or you name it, we need to be looking at that tolerance that those varieties have, especially if we're planting something in a field that may be a concern.
Awesome. That's really good stuff, Kevin. I appreciate that. It's kind of what I was thinking. You read my mind on that, for sure. And something that we need to remember is in those fields. So we had some pretty good looking beans that were really good looking all year, and then kind of dusted off here before they should have, I feel like. So that's kind of a big deal for sure. So appreciate the update. Appreciate the answered question there too, Kevin. Thanks to all you guys for getting up early this morning and getting this update out there. I think there's some good stuff in here. I think if these guys will stick with me, we're probably going to do one more of these episodes in 2 weeks here, and then we'll kind of cut it off for the season and come back with kind of some of our normal podcasts and our normal off-season stuff. So appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate you guys taking time super early this morning to jump on here and give some updates.